you cannot die in the dream because you have a soul. Some are wondering, what is the identity of the soul? What is its true component? And from what I understand now, its true component is that it's a gift that makes you immortal, really. And there are things that are not immortal. They transmute into other things, but they no longer can recall themselves anymore. That's what immortality is, by the way. It's actually the recollection of what you are across time and space. Right? Like you're a reasoning being, a thinking being. That's why they got gods and things that last thousands and thousands or countless periods of time, etc. So this is that envelope of consciousness. So you have this envelope, and they say that even the elementals don't have it. That elementals don't have souls as what we could call a soul, and we're using the word soul. So for an elemental can actually die. For us, we can't die. So this is why you see this phenomenon when we're in the astral plane, we can get killed and then we can keep coming back to life. So just always remember your gift. That's what actually makes humans higher, because that was my finalization of what goes on with when everyone's powerful. I had to go before that and realize that power in itself just means that there's levels. Okay? Because how could you be powerful if everybody is the same? You see what I mean? So the word powerful comes in when you actually have a hierarchy of beings. It can even be time. Certain beings that were here longer are grandfathered in. And they say that even if we don't like some of those beings, we still have to remember the divine order gave them the permission to create us. So that means that if any person that is an ancestors, going back to the uncles, great-great-grandfathers, great-great-grandmothers, etc., and you keep going back. But as you're going through that lineage and that line, because this is not static, it's ever changing. Some gods that were amazing are crummy right now. Some that were just the worst ones are completely rehabilitated. We act like that everything stays static. No, everything changes. However, you have a personal relationship with your ancestors within. And so it's important to clear the consciousness at times of what we think the conditions of our ancestors are. And if we have some beef, literally, if we have a problem with them, we should realize that a lot of those problems are actually developed within this developmental process and how it's going. Like there are certain things that are going to happen that are going to impact us a certain way. So what we're going to talk about very briefly is that, so now we're kind of going to dive into the first layer of the water, because if you notice in the Bible, it says, and the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the deep. So that would kind of let you know right there that, well, if there was something already in the deep, then there has to be a story before the Bible. Not to mention, it talks about how, I'm just citing this work here that millions of people believe in. It also talks about how God destroyed the earth with a flood. How much do you think the flood would affect something that was already in the water? It wouldn't. So there you have two logical accounts that if there is something inside the water, which it says that you need water to create all of life. It actually says that all of the elements start on the planet as water first. Okay, so what I'm saying is that even the Bible is staying away from the whole water thing and any kind of like claims that God created the water, because the water was a kingdom that was already going on. And we started digging into this a little bit with the Maya, but I don't know, something else kind of dived in and was like, look, man, I'm tired of this, because you just going to hear a bunch of more stories after the fact. Great Mother's about to come through and explain the whole thing. I was great. I've been waiting on Great Mother to explain this, what is going on. And then it took me right into the mermaid thing again. So let me just top down it, turn on some gas on this, and go through this process with you. What is the difference between a fish and a snake? Like, sometimes we're not getting, like, you know how we were talking about how every word for fish actually seemed to be a cognate of soul. And then every time they talk about transmutations of human beings and souls, it always gets into fish and all this kind of stuff. But then we got this whole serpent thing that we were just looking into with the naga. But then when you take a step back for a moment, it's like, wait a minute. Well, they both have, first of all, when you lay out this vertebrae, like I saw a video today, they laid out one of those longer eels and just showed you like how long the spine is, right? And then also they showed, of course, there were some other fish, and the fish have scales. So we're looking at these snakes, and these snakes have scales, and they also have this long vertebrae. And so we realize that the only difference between a snake and a fish is that the snakes are on land and the fish are in water. So that whole Darwinism thing is, again, some type of pun towards the realization that you have water humans or water spirits, and then you got physical spirits that actually walk upon the earth. But their animator, like the animator, the actual core functional module, which is the spine connecting into the brain, is actually coming from this primordial form, okay? So this also connects in with why the astral organs, have identities, okay? Because see, you're looking at the physical organs in your body, but I keep telling you, look at your spiritual body, okay? Your spiritual body that exists on the astral plane that's tied into this body. Which one do you really think actually came first? Obviously that one. But everything that you have there, you have one here, or cognate of it here. That's the only way that I can actually tug, let's say, certain emotions. Like if in the dream you're feeling love, it's because you have something that's connecting right into your physical body that is a replica of what is going on in your spirit body. So you have a spirit organ. And what I'm trying to explain to you is that, as I mentioned before, when you look at Haeckel's radiolaria, that all of the parts of the body, mainly the organs, such as the heart, etc., all came from organisms from the ocean. And that what architects really were, which were for sure feminine, were beings that put those pieces together in the water. Okay, so what I'm saying is that the formulation of more advanced beings was the combination of different organic organisms that first exist on the astral plane. Because you could be like, okay, you could be imagining these people or beings in the ocean, and then, I don't know, a heart there, and then, with a liver, and no, that's not what we're talking about. In the astral plane, though, that goes on, where different pieces are put together and formulated together, because you can do supernatural things there. Basically, you could do anything that your mind can conceive. That's why that space is so powerful, because anything you think, let's bring them together and let's make it do this, it'll start doing all of that. Okay, so we need to realize the supernatural plane is in effect. But because you're not melding with the supernatural plane all the time, or we're not talking about spirits in the supernatural plane, and we don't have communication with supernatural plane all the time, etc., you can imagine just how many things are going on that human beings are completely unaware of. Okay? So what I'm also going to explain to you is that, so your soul, so you have the soul, if you may, which is the gift. It's an immortal existence. You're always going to be able to recall and think in your own mind and talk to yourself. Okay, no matter where you're at and what happened, and if the big bomb drop or whatever, you're just going to be sitting there talking to yourself about what happened until you decide to create light again. Okay, so this soul, when it creates light, what it's really doing is it's developing layers around itself, or shells. Okay, so what a soul is doing is it's creating shells around itself with the materials from its own existence. That's why you see shells are building, or mollusks and other sea animals are building their shell around them with the salt and the slime coming from their own bodies. So what I'm getting at here is that the human body is a shell itself. The astral body is a shell itself from the term of what the soul is doing, because what the soul is doing is it's creating all of these, you're calling them identities now, you're calling them vehicles now. It's creating all these things around it. And then obviously the magnitude of the being is really determined by how many of these bodies or experiences that it actually has. Okay? So the first thing I want to dive into is the awareness that racism actually started off first as sexism. The core to racism that exists today actually began with the war between the divine feminine and the undivine masculine. Okay? So let's just make this very clear. Man versus woman created racism. Racism didn't exist on the planet first. The first real racism was man versus woman. So let me unfold this for you. So the Inquisition in itself, after careful examination, was indeed woman hunting. If you look at the inquisitive, the bulls, the edicts, it says if a woman is caught with a strange mark on her body, if a woman has named her any animal around her, something we're doing right now, like I got a couple cats there. If a woman is gossiping or talking with another woman without approval from her husband, so they just going on and on and on. And then so basically in conclusion, if the woman is doing any of this, then she's a witch and she's to be hunted and burned at the stake. This was what is written and what happened on the planet. And what you have to do is, because the blood still crying from the earth, is you have to rewind for a moment and ask yourself, whoa, how did we get to this point? It's kind of like a movie that starts in the end. We're kind of like coming in at the end or the middle, at least, of a movie. And we're like, whoa, what happened? And I need to take you back step by step through the process of how all women were all of a sudden deemed as witches. And women were being exterminated across the world. And all of the knowledge which was in the hands of women was being taken, usurped, and then turned into the religions that we're seeing today. Okay, so let's go step by step. The first word is syllabus. The root to this word syllabus. So if you go and look this word up, a syllabus is actually when you are either, you're going to do a movie, you're going to do a course, you're going to do something, but you're going to lay out all of the key points, the bullet points, and the fundamentals of the structure of that experience. That is a syllabus, okay? If somebody doesn't know what a syllabus is, because it is a word that's not really commonly used, unless you're in literature or you just got a good vernacular, maybe somebody can put a link inside of the chat here just so somebody can refresh on that. So the word syllabus, the root to its word is sibyl. Now, a sibyl is a mermaid or a siren. So we have one word that actually says what the whole story is and the summary of the story and everything about what was going to go on became our word, which was derived from sibyl. And the Sibyl, as you'll notice that there's a book also called the Sibylline Oracles that was removed from the Bible. And it's basically this continuous prophetic work. It's basically the future being dictated by what was known as Pythonists. There was no Pythagoras. There was only the Pythonists. which were women that obviously, as you can see, connect in with the Nagas, that had the ability to prophesy or see the future. Because as I said before, because the snake's whole body is an ear, it can read vibrations across time. So it knows when something's going to happen way before it's going to happen. And the Sibyls were in tune with that. In fact, all the women were. Because these, what we're calling women or maidens, were in the water first before God was hovering over it. Okay? This is the real missing link. I even wanted to cuss there. I'm just going to keep it G-rated, but this is the missing link. This makes it tough for guys like me cruising through planets like this to actually realize what the hell is going on so that I can understand where I put my ship, so I can get my stuff back together and forget about anything that has to do with taking stuff off balance. This would make it so tough for you here if you did not know the real her story and where all of these spiritual traditions come from and what really happened, what popped off to make this so crazy to where not only did they want to kill all the women, but they stole all the knowledge and locked up all the sanctums. Because let's go through a few more words here. We have then heresy, right? Which is a word that we use to actually say that someone has been disavowed, but it begins with her. We have this word heretic, which basically is the same connotation, someone who is not a part of the order, and it begins with her. But then we have this philosopher, which is the fundamentals to every single thing that we know as knowledge and wisdom, containing not only the Sophia, we also have the word Sophia. And we have words like the ballet, which is the feminized version of the ball, which the ball is a feminine thing. Like we got this mythos that Baal was a male god. Look at Ghostbusters. If you look at the first Ghostbusters, they're evoking Baal in the Ghostbusters as being the big ghost that needs to be busted. Okay? And what does it come through as? A female, not a male, because the ballet is the Balat, which is basically that the whole world was ruled by women, but not the women that you think. See, because the humans, like the male and the female of the human race, are in themselves incomplete until they either unlock their divine feminine or their divine masculine. This divine feminine that I'm referring to from the ocean, if you may, this divine feminine is actually a male and a female combined, but predominantly feminine. Okay, so it's actually, that's where this whole hermaphrodite or Aphrodite comes from. It means that the beings from the ocean, the original ones, they can procreate on their own. They can reproduce themselves. So they had the whole planet, if you may, which had no physical surfaces. That's why the Bible says we're the God, which is a technology. Like I have to explain that in a minute, where the arrival of the gods and their systems. But in the Bible, it says about Peter, that Peter is the rock and I will build my church upon you and it will not be assailed. And what that literally means is that there's a proclamation of the first physical landmass coming out of the deep, or even maybe even being landed here. Maybe we're all floating on top of it now. And as I said, what Freemasonry is, or what a courthouse is, which is run by Freemasons, is a vessel that is docked on land. So it takes you into a perspective once again that the ocean is space. And what is going on in space, you don't know, because you're never in the ocean. You're never in the deep. There's a law or a rule about the deep and being in there. No one knows about what's going on in there. And that is synonymous to the dream world, also in the control of the dream world. So something has already happened here is what I'm saying. Something has already gone on that has dictated who is able to know certain knowledge, who knows these secrets about the Great Mother, who knows about what happened here on the planet before God showed up, who knows about what is actually existing in the deep. And then when you know, it's going to put together all of the connections that you're seeing here in the world, and even why there are very nefarious spirits also in the water that have a vested interest at seeing if they can do away with as many humans as possible, because for the most simple fact, and this is going to get a little R-rated if you want to take your kids and put them now to bed. I'll give you about a couple minutes, or you want to hit your pause, but basically we're shitting on them. We're not understanding that even if when you talk about the world that is right below this one, we can't talk like they don't have their own pride and they don't have their own rules and they don't have their own ideals just because we feel like we're on top of them. Right? Because how this is all supposed to be structured is if you happen to be on top, that means you have a responsibility. It's like a parent or a guardian. And then when you move out of that space, you're just going to catch into a bunch of chaos. But what this is about is that these spirits, specifically from the water, are responsible for regulating everything to do with the water. So they're responsible for the rain. They're responsible for the ocean, many of the large life forms in the ocean, and regulating all the stuff going on inside the ocean. And their experience also with us has been that we basically throw dirty water onto them and don't even acknowledge that they're there. Does that make sense? Let me just rewind for you. If you can imagine that there's another level to life right below us, our pollution, our sewage, our lack of basically being very mindful about what we're doing on the planet with the rivers especially, and the ocean, because the rivers flow into the ocean, is what they're pissed about. And some of them are so pissed that they've basically sworn vengeance on the humans that are actually walking on the earth. But we'll get to that here in a moment. But just so you can understand, why would there be certain conflicts between the beings that live in the water versus the beings that live on land? And it's because there's a lack of awareness of that there's even beings that are in the water. It has many humans not even realizing that when they're polluting all of the rivers and things, they're upsetting some very powerful entities that actually have been here and actually are responsible for a lot of the emotional levels of where our consciousness is. Right? And they're also very connected into the divine feminine, because anything that has water, they can move through, and you can too. In fact, that's why I keep saying the astral plane is actually like particles or small droplets of water in globs. Basically, that we're in water now. So if I put a dehumidifier in this room, I'm going to suck a bunch of water out of the air. So technically I'm breathing water now. It's just the only difference is once I go below sea level, now I need a whole different organ. I need gills. I need my organ to be reconfigured. But when you're in the astral body, that's what the astral body is reconfigured to do. It can breathe underwater so well, you don't even know that you're breathing underwater. You just assume that you're just back in another world that you're projecting from your mind. But no, you're actually in the water. And the world itself is non-visible to the eye because it's sitting in what we could say is another dimension. Okay? So what you can then understand is that for the women that lived on Earth, because as I explained that even California was all women, the Amazons is really the root to it. Because the Amazon River, if you can understand how it moves even as itself. Also, the original Loa or water spirits that were there that came from the ocean, you can understand how many of the land masses that began to form and the temples that were built by what you could say was the priestesses. Okay? And so, So you're looking at a natural progression here of a planet that is going through high levels of sentience, where there's already a very advanced sentient being. And I think we're calling that being now Venus, living inside of the ocean, the original Starbuck, Mother Mary, if you may. And Mary's guild and cliques, they say that the Amazons were her stormtroopers, meaning that there was an entire array of women warriors on the planet, because nobody could live on the planet unless they were real warriors. The weather was enough. So if you're going to raise anything, you need to be able to basically overcome some of these elements and some of these other life forms that exist within the deep. So the women who were here first, they were warriors because that's what they were trained to do. Does that make sense? So they're not like necessarily the human women that you're seeing today. They made up the stories of the Titans. That Helen of Troy and all that are stories about these powerful women, which later on became known as the Devas. All the Devas are women. There's no male Devas. But remember that the pun on this is that all Devas are also males too, because they have the seed and the egg in their life, in their entire life form. So you know how the male has the seed and the female has the egg in the human species. In the devacanic plane, those females, they can produce their own seed, okay? And this also makes them very powerful because they have like a generator that generates magnetism within them, within their being, okay? So just so you can kind of understand the makeup of these specific beings that they're calling the Devas. They're the developers, okay? We have the word today, developers in computer programming, because those are the people who build the computer programs. Those are the Devas, okay? So this is where things were at. So then, even to a point where when men were populated upon the earth, as I said before, the Nomo are saying that also because of that ninth child that was aborted, beings started coming out not complete. Okay, like that's what created this male and female thing. Because other than that, when the experiment, as they called it, went perfectly, the being that's produced is self-sustained. However, because of the schism, it produced what we now call today a male and a female, meaning a separate being. And this separate being created the inclination of what we would call distortion, evil, if you may. That's the birth of it. So it was a thing to regulate the amount of males on the planet. So just as you kind of see it in the beehive, the males were really the ones keeping the children. That's how you see it also in the lion tribe, right? The women were the ones that were going out into different areas, even populating with some of what I'm now calling the little people, which you would say is gnomes or earth spirits. They're very gentle and peaceable. This is because water spirits, they like people that are very childlike, very non-destructive. So what you're seeing is that the mother kind of prefers the more of the childlike, non-destructive energy. And the ones who really fit into that category the most were the earth people, the earth spirits, if you may, the gnomes, if you may, which are also known as the little people. They wouldn't hurt a fly. And they also, because of their ability to, their connection with the earth, it basically put them right in tune with nature. So when we're starting to say that other tribes are being developed, those tribes are being developed because the women from the ocean, if you may, are mating with the tribes that are coming from the elemental kingdoms. That's why she's basically the mother of all things. Because yes, we have these human bodies, but we have a myriad of other animals and creations that are here. And you have to understand that on the astral plane, it is the divine feminine that was actually initiating and engaging the life of all of those life forms. Okay. So just so we're very clear, but this is like the dawn of the epoch. But as things progress, you actually do have an awareness by the males that they are somewhat skewed, that they're not the ones that are the diviners or the ones that have the spiritual power or the ones that have what you're now calling the sacerdotal right, which basically means the ability to determine who is going to be the ruler. Now, see, that's kind of hardwired because the ruler has to be born. So without a woman, there's no ruler, right, on the planet Earth. I mean, it's just kind of like hardwired. But you're going to see this unfoldment of the male entities that are on the planet, because they have that inclination also towards what you would call evil, begin to grumble and complain, if you may, and begin to form into groups that are ripe to becoming traitors to the matriarch, but also still very conservative about what they're going to do because they're nowhere near in the position of power, physically, mentally, or spiritually, to actually overthrow the divine feminine kingdom. So just so you know, it was not the divine masculine that overthrew. It wasn't the masculine that overthrew the feminine kingdom. It was actually a war between the divine feminine and what you could say is the undivine feminine. Later on called witches. Okay, and this is where you start getting a faction actually representing someone that is now employed to kill witches, and then but still saying that they represent Mother Mary. Okay, so let's still take this step by step. As I said, this is going to be some of the deepest conversation tonight because these things are basically secrets. There's not that many people that actually know this knowledge. It is, again, the missing link, but the sheer fact of somebody knowing it does put them into a different position on earth because your eyes are open to a lot of things. For instance, Anubis is not a male dog. It's actually not a dog at all. It's actually a wolf or a jackal, and it's a female. So how this mythos goes is that actually cannabis, as we know as a plant, is actually Anubis, which is a female. Now that makes sense since, as for anybody who knows about cannabis, you're not smoking the male plant, are you? It's the female that you're smoking that causes the hallucinogenic responses, which is basically the awakening of the lower chakras. So marijuana, also known as, it has Mary in front of it. This is what I'm saying. If you see and you know the riddle unfolds itself. So what Anubis was the one that conducted the souls into the netherworld, right? So what we're saying with conducting a soul in the netherworld is we're saying to be able to send a consciousness into the lower regions of existence in order to extract from the deep the knowledge and the wisdom that is there. So that's why some people find themselves when they smoke this stuff that they seem to gain this creativity. They seem to gain this knowledge from somewhere. They seem to become inspired in some way. And this is because they're literally going right into the astral plane while still awake, because cannabis and Anubis are the same. But so now you can also see from that example how gods come into plants also. They're not just in humans. Or energies don't just stay as, let's say, spiritual forms. They also come in as plants. That will also answer the mystery of ayahuasca for you and what energy is in ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is a water spirit. Aya is a water spirit. So it turns out that the water spirit thing is not new. And it's only on this side of the globe, or mainly in the Western culture, that we have no clue about the existence of these beings. Because in Africa, They know all about this and the history, and they go deep about how and why many people are actually afraid of water spirits, and why many people try to call on water spirits. And it always seems to tie into either one, wanting to hurt somebody, because from a level of power, because water spirits exist on a supernatural plane, they are very destructive. And as I said before, they're not too fond of humans in the first place. So it was very easy to convince certain powerful water spirits to be aligned with the evil forces. And likewise, for, let's say, the quote unquote good water spirits, it will almost be like trying to maintain no human contact at all, because how many humans do you actually find that are in alignment? But that was just the beginning, because as time begins to progress, we actually find that people began to, as I explained before about even the ancient mother and the daughters, but also even all the way up until this day, that there became a commingling between the ocean or the astral plane and those that are in the physical reality or on land. Okay, and this is like the Montagues and the Capulets for real, because the two kingdoms, because of what continuously happens between both of their existences with each other, are always in some type of quarrel. But at the end of the day, also there are these passionate love stories about mermaids falling in love with men, or men basically being married to mermaid women, etc., and having children that then become a mixture between both of those life forms. Okay, so as we keep going forward, we find that so inside of the human body, since the water spirit itself has so much to do with the makeup of the human body, that the emotional subset of the human being can be predominantly ascribed to the water spirit itself. So that means that from an ancestral level, okay, so basically what we're looking at is we're looking at this system that determines how stuff is passing to you through generations and through lineages. It's being passed through water. So when you have this, what we're calling the sperm and what we're calling the egg, they have water. And what that water is it's containing all of the memories. We're calling that DNA now, but that's a living life form. And so when the living life form is then passed into the new being, they then inherit all of the information, knowledge, wisdom, and all of that of the old being. What they also inherit, though, is that if the old being had been doing any kind of pacts or rituals or anything like that with these beings, that they actually hold that person to, or that new person, or which is still the same person, to that payment. So this created a scenario where a lot of people on earth, as I mentioned before, were in some type of debt to either water spirits, because water spirits are directly tied into making a person rich, or other spirits such as the fire and such as the earth and the other elementals. So basically the stage of humanity, because initially humans were deemed as being somewhat higher than the elementals, they basically end up in a state where they were lower than the elementals once they began to abuse the power and were scaled down. So remember, all of the power that humans have is drawn from the elementals, as I was explaining in the beginning. But then when the humans became servants to the Siths, the Undines, the Gnomes, and the Salamanders, which are the entities that correspond to the four elements, when they started asking them for things, they were basically demoted to one level below the elementals. This would be like a prison for the human body and the human being. And these atrocities were numerous because people were asking these beings for everything from money to health to power to strike vengeance. And it's going on still today a lot. A lot of people are still doing it and they don't even know they're doing it. The church is a big proponent of bringing more what we would call unclean water spirits into the land or into the spiritual or the astral plane around the person. Let me explain. So imagine, as I mentioned before, that in the water kingdom, they have a somewhat identical setup to what we have going on land, in respect to that there are very wealthy ones and there are very poor ones. There are very inspired ones and creative ones that know how to use their powers. And then there's lowlives and thugs in their realm also. And like attracts like. And that's why they say that with spirits, just in general, they don't really force you to do anything, because what happens is if you're already doing something that is attracting that kind of energy around you, they're just harmonizing with the energy that you're already bringing around. And then it becomes like one kind of club, and they just try to make suggestions to you and you go with those suggestions anyway. But it becomes something that you feel close to doing, because for a person that's not, let's say, a killer, if something comes into their mind and says you should kill them, the person's not going to kill that person. But if the person is already subjective to these kind of things, then that could seem like a good idea. So you need to understand that spirits don't really have power over human beings. It's the environments that we put ourselves into, and ultimately still how we are anyway, that allows spirits to be able to get humans to do certain things. And so I wanted to make that very clear, because I don't want to make it sound like humans are hostage to these spirits. It's always that, hey, I want to achieve this or be this, or basically cheat in order to get ahead. And that's kind of like gambling on the spiritual plane. So any kind of entity that can answer that prayer is still going to want something in return. So what happened, especially within Christianity, was that the core fundamentals to Christianity was still within John the Baptist, who is also known as Oannes, who also wasn't a male. It turns out that none of the characters from the Bible, especially from the prophecy side, were males at all. Okay, so John the Baptist, or Oannes, was the great initiator or baptizer. So you can imagine that entities such as the Mamawati, or the spirits of the water, were the ones that were taking a person through this born again process, where they were now initiated into these new mysteries with this Holy Ghost, the Virgin Mary. And as you can see, all of the symbolism around the Virgin Mary and all the symbolism around Christianity, John the Baptist is telling you all of this stuff is maritime. All of this stuff is coming from the ocean, the Holy See, the Papal Bull, all of those things. When you really look at what they're about the ocean kingdom. And that's why I'm bringing this up today. I don't just want to sit here and talk about water spirits today as if it's fascinating. What I'm trying to explain to you is that there's an underlying scenario that is going on here on planet Earth that has to do with the beings in the water and the decisions that are being made by the beings that are on land, that are either in communication with the beings in the water or at war with the beings on the water, and how that is impacting us in our lives, especially people who are mixed with both. And I would argue that since all human beings have 70% water in their human body, that this may be something that they may not want to sit out on. Is what I'm saying, and just be like, people are just oblivious to this going on. So let's look at it a little bit deeper. So they say that these water spirits basically control riches, right? So in all of these cultures that still know about this, they pray to these water spirits for money and children. So if a person is barren or broke, they pray to these spirits. So I had to take a step back and say, well, how is it that these beings control the money? And the first word that came up was obviously the current. Because in the ocean, they got a current. And as we know, the money is called currency. Now, I can't explain to you exactly how it works. All I can do is tell you that I'm absolutely 100% positively sure that the people who created money are in league with the people who are in the ocean. Because the ocean people, they run all of the money. And as I said before, you got a few things that happen. So one, Christianity is one, but the other one is poverty. Poverty pushed a lot of beings into the direction of asking other entities for money, fame, and wealth. And it came at a cost. So even imagine now, like, people pray to God. Now they're in the same setting. They don't realize that in those temples that there's snakes and fish all around them. That's why he calls it the fisher of men. Okay, so there's snakes and fish all around them, actual energies. And then they're in there praying and asking for something, right? And then if something grants that, who's going to be sitting there waiting around to grant that? And what are they going to want for that? You see what I mean? And so we're just taken under this inclination that, well, they don't want anything. You pray to God and he gives you what you, if he wants you to have it, he gives it to you, and he doesn't want anything. And nothing can be further from the truth, because you and I both know that's just not how it works. Anything that you want, first of all, you need to check your needs. And then anything you want, you need to really figure out if you need to have that or not, or if that's just some kind of inclination or passion. And if something happens to give it to you and it was an inclination or a passion, you got to imagine that maybe that being doesn't have your best interest in mind. And so that's what humanity got itself into. So for a while, you basically saw humans living like slaves, to a point where so many humans became slaves to water spirits that every time the human being came back, they say it passed down to the third and fourth generation. Every time they came back in the physical, the water spirit would literally try to come and get the child to bring them into that kingdom, to be a slave for them in that kingdom. So they were using humans as slaves. They even have the mythos states that, especially in Africa, that when people would be by the river, or someone would be by the river, if the water spirit liked the person, it would just snatch them right into the water, and the person would not be seen again. And the medicine men and women would have to do these rituals for 7 days to try to basically appease these water spirits to bring back this person. And they have accounts that the person was, in certain cases, bought back. Then they also told everyone that if this happens to you, the place that you arrive in, they're going to start asking you to do certain things. And they said, basically, be very bad at doing it. If they tell you to go to the store and get something, bring the wrong item back, because the temperament on a water spirit is so like finicky that if they think that you're dumb, this is literally in the works. If they think that you're dumb, they will let you back. They will let you go anyway, and you'll go back to the human kingdom. But when you return, you'll have a gift. And they said that many of the women that returned, they came back with this gift to be able to bear children. Like, they basically became the midwives, that they had this knowledge of how to deliver children. So anybody that was snatched up by water spirits in return came back with gifts of how to raise children, and also how to work with water. So what we're doing is that we're putting together details here. Okay. This is how, you can even brute force your way into higher levels of spiritual awareness. You almost have to do that anyway, because anybody that knows this goes under a title of a grand master and has already been initiated into the secret societies that all of our governments are actually involved in. And those people that you're seeing as politicians are really, really the lowlings of it, because the other ones, they all are in real spiritual garb all the time. They have all types of fetishes and things around them that are spirits within themselves, or things that are taken from the astral plane and brought here. Meaning that these people have even been able to accomplish manifesting things from the astral plane into the physical space that actually have power. And they're given things that belong to their fathers and mothers for 10 or 20 generations back. So basically all this is going on right behind us. Basically, we have no clue of all this going on. Let's keep going here. So the question should be presented then also, how are these water spirits increasing a person's wealth? And that question was answered. It's because what they're capable of doing is they're capable of boosting a person's magnetism. This will also let you know that basically what being poor is your magnetism is low. And there are other things that can boost your magnetism besides spirits, but I can tell you 100% from ever being around people that had dealt with spirits or where spirits were around, they seem to bring an energy into all of the field. And this explains it. It was like everybody could lucid dream or recall or remember or feel the energy all of a sudden. And that's because they basically bring this energetic into the field, and your body, because your body is like on this flow, is able to then pick up on that energetic, and then it boosts your magnetism. And then, as you know, because it's wheels within wheels, that's why I call it the wheel of God, it starts turning all of your chakras. And as your chakras are turning more, it's basically boosting their abilities. So just to be very clear, the body is designed like a clock, with the chakras themselves as being the cogs in the clock, with the root chakra being the largest of the cogs. And when the root chakra, which is the most difficult to dislodge, but when it starts to move, it turns all subsequent chakras. But this is running on the energetics of your field. And that's why it's very important to stay positive, to stay on point, to stay jubilant, to smile, those kind of things, and to not hang out in fields of depression, loneliness, angry, being upset, all those kind of fields, because you already have receptors all on you. This stuff is everywhere. I'm not talking about a kingdom that's not right here. That's why I was saying the kingdom of heaven would be upon us, but nobody would be able to see it. So they're saying that all of this is going on around us, but we can't see it. And that's what I'm explaining to you now. So now we understand that also in your own arts, in your own crafts, it just means that's why breathing, it boosts your magnetism because it boosts your field. You know, cleaning out your organs, it boosts your magnetism, so it boosts out your field. So it boosts your field. So remember, I explained this a long time ago about how those techniques took misfortune out of your life. But I wasn't able to completely explain how. And now I'm telling you, if you are experiencing financial issues, going on things like cleaning your body and doing things like cleaning your environment will remove those financial issues, because what financial issues are is your field is low in conductivity.